Oh my goodness. I have been looking forward to this conversation for like ever. I am so happy that you're here. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. Thank you. Thank you so
That's
much.
awesome. Great. For those of you who don't know, I am pleased to welcome in Tami Brown Rodriguez. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Untrafficked, which is an organization dedicated to rescuing children from exploitation and training communities to fight human trafficking in real time. Tami, this isn't just policy. This is personal,
Yeah.
right? So the last time that we spoke, you talked about your niece. And it was when she was a teenager that she became a victim of trafficking. Can you walk us through what happened? Like, how did this even start?
Thank you for that, and thank you for having me. I know that can be a very difficult topic for people to talk about or even listen to. But what we have to understand as a nation is that unfortunately, my niece's story is not unique. Unfortunately, this is happening across this nation in every single zip code, in every single city. And so it's really important to understand what we need to figure out on how we can stop this. My niece's situation was that we believe that she was assaulted. Her first experience of being abused was in the home at a very young age. And what we know about statistically is when that happens, the trauma that that creates in a child's brain, it makes them way more susceptible. In fact, some studies say up to 87% more likely if they don't navigate that abuse and that trauma when it happens to be exploited or to be trafficked. So it's 87% more likely. So in her case, it happened in the home, and then she was in school, and there were some disciplinary problems. She was acting out. My sister could see that something wasn't right, but we didn't understand. And what we found out later is that she was being groomed by somebody in the school. And so that grooming process, which many of us, we might hear that word, but we don't understand that word. It's oftentimes when a trusted adult starts paying attention to our kids, giving them special attention. It doesn't generally start out with sexual assault. It generally starts off with building a relationship, giving compliments, making them feel safe, making them feel seen and heard. And then as they build up that trust relationship, that's when they cross the line. That's when maybe they ask for a picture, or maybe they take them out on a date, or maybe, and even some cases that we're seeing now, it's delivering food to the kids' houses. Something as simple as like Takis and a Monster drink, having DoorDash deliver. And that makes that child feel special and cared for. And then oftentimes the gifts start to evolve. And then there is an exchange, whether it's a picture or a sexual favor. And that's when that line gets crossed. And so a lot of parents can't see that. We didn't see that in my family. Um, some of the signs were, as I said, like the disciplinary problems. We might think they're just acting out or they're hanging out with the wrong kids. Well, something as innocent as that can turn into my niece's story where she was gone for 15 years.
Oh my gosh. I can't even begin to how to even unpack that. I think a question that how fast do these groomers work? Because you mentioned the red flags, which is fantastic. I had no idea. I mean, now that technology has evolved, yeah, it makes sense. DoorDash and Uber Eats, whenever, hey, I'm craving this and that, and they kind of start acting like that boyfriend, right? That they kind of long for, but also like because they're so young, maybe it's like that fathery
Yeah.
ish.
Yes. It's both and. Like you nailed it because when we're looking at like in my sister's situation, she was a single mom raising two kids, doing the best that she could, middle America. And what we find is that Romeo effect where they're finally getting attention, they're finally getting that missing part of whatever in their life is missing. It's an emotional need that gets filled. And then it turns into manipulation. And so with the internet and with all these chat features and with all the social media, we have become so desensitized that we don't realize manipulation is happening and they're buying into the story that they're important and they're valued. And so the minute that individual asks them to do something and puts that peer pressure on them, they're way more likely to do that thing. And what we know right now statistically is the FBI says that there's over 750,000 predators online every moment working on our kids as we speak. And that's through the chat features, that's through social media. And so we have to take a step back and think through how can we create a safe environment for our kids instead of being like, be careful, you're going to be trafficked, right? You and I both know kids will be like, oh, mom, come on. But if we can talk about personal safety, healthy choices, making good decisions, that changes the framework. So it's not a scary conversation, but it's a normalized conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. And it gives me like so many flashbacks growing up. I was raised in El Paso, so that's a border city. And so every single day I'd get that lecture of be careful, do not get, but it was a lot more simpler. This was back, I mean, like 20, 15, 20 years ago. And so it was more like, do not get in the car, do not be walking alone because easily they can just grab you, throw you in the car, and then just you drive across the border and they never see you again. But it was those difficult questions that even as preteens, as teenagers, I didn't know what to ask. Like, well, what do these people even look like? Or what would, and obviously my parents being immigrants, they didn't know how to answer that, but there was always that fear mongering of, well, it could happen to you. Okay, but I don't know how it could happen to me. You give me the basic Hollywood example. However, it's those details of, well, it doesn't have to start precisely right away as a snagging as if it was like the cartel. It can
That's
start
right.
with grooming.
That's right. And so you had asked me about how long the process takes. And I want to
Yeah.
kind of go back to that because predators are patient. So when we were kids, it was like the taken where, you're kidnapped. Now, only 1.5 to 2% of all cases are kidnapped cases or they go missing. It's a very small percent because now it's happening in plain sight. And so what you and I have to realize is the conversation has to change from that creepy guy in a white van that's lurking around, right? Into devices, into people pretending to be children, whether it's on chat features, on any kind of app that has a chat feature, we have to look out for. We have to look out for gaming, like the Roblox. Any time that they're gaming with strangers, they build that trust relationship. And maybe they give them something free, like a skin or access to another level. And that is something of value. And all of a sudden, those gifts start increasing and the trust starts building. And as parents, we need to think through, is there a time when our kids are on devices and we ask them to put it away and they get really defensive? They get really weird. That it's almost as if the response doesn't line up with the ask. And that could be a telltale sign of, of that they're talking to somebody they shouldn't talk to. Or there's features in these games where they can exit out really quickly so the parents don't see the conversations. So these are the kind of nuances that we need to look at digital safety so that our kids, like you were safe because you did not get into that stranger's vehicle, but now we're looking at how do we make sure that our kids are talking to the right people? And so we do that with normalizing conversations, like being present. We don't expect parents to be perfect, but what if you're just present? Put the phone down. Ask kids regular questions like, who made you laugh this week? Or, which trusted adults in your life that you feel comfortable with? Like, start having these conversations so that our kids are way more able to open up and they don't feel weird about having a sex conversation, but they're just having daily safety conversations. Because grooming, when you've got a predator grooming a child, it could be up to 9 months and they wait and they They track them on social media. They figure out, is that child's parent, both of the parents in play? Oh, they don't have a father figure. Okay. Maybe they start complimenting. Maybe they just start saying, "Hey, I saw you at that game," or "I saw that picture," liking their pictures. That's how this begins. And then it starts layering into exactly what you said about the Romeo effect. And they just think it's a relationship. There was a case that we worked with where the young girl was 10 years old, 10, and her mom was running for an elected office. So the family was busier than usual. And come to find out, the young girl finally self-identified and finally kind of confessed. And immediately we were able to take steps to fortify and protect that young girl on her social media. But if we didn't have those conversations, that young girl could have easily met somebody at a restaurant or met her friends, had a group of friends, and maybe met somebody. And then it escalates to the unthinkable, which is the exploitation and the trafficking. And so the distinction here is the grooming is the behavior, right? And then the exploitation begins when there's an exchange of, like we talked about, like it could be a gift, or there becomes an exchange of housing or food or a purse or nails getting done. It could be something so minor that can change lives of our children forever.
The the concern that I have, I think, when it comes to video games would have to be this. My brother was raised in the video, so I'm aware with the lingo and stuff like that. Unfortunately, there's also that trust on the fact that it's the culture when it comes to video games. I noticed that. It's like it's all ages that kind of play, whether you're young or you're extremely old. And it's usually the middle schoolers that are like cussing up a storm within the game. So how I mean, it's a really fine line, I think, a gray line, very, very thin, to be able to distinguish whether you're being groomed through the video games when it's genuinely considered a culture, don't you think? Or how would parents even be able to define that specifically?
Right? Because that goes back to what a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship looks like. So maybe that's the defining language. Because to your point, we don't want to be those crazy moms. Right? Like we want, I mean, at some point, right? At some point. And so, and so when you start having conversations with your kiddos at a point in time where they can understand safe and not safe, and also create an environment where if there is an exchange, like have it be normalized where if they're talking to somebody and they're gaming and they start getting free skins or free whatever the levels are, that's when we need to be having weekly conversations about, did anybody give you a gift or did anybody make you laugh or what was the highlight of your week? And they said, "Oh, well, I was on whatever. I don't do video games, but let's Roblox and I got into whatever level." Start talking about that. Ask really good questions and be present with your kids. And that's the game changer here, is
And
being,
you have a point. That's actually true because asking those, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. If did anyone buy you a skin? And it kind of sounds like a dumb question, honestly. It really does. Yeah.
but that changes everything, right? Because then
Yeah.
they can say, "Oh, yeah, this," like whatever name they give them, right?
Sure.
Well, as parents, then we might want to consider looking into their social media. And there's a way that you can define deep fakes. There's a way you can figure out if these pictures that people use on their social media are deep fakes.
How?
You can
How
do
can you do that?
a reverse image lookup on Google. It's not hard. And then you can, this
Oh.
image is used 127 times, right? So something as simple as that. And something as simple as talking to your kids about their social media. Like in hindsight, for our family, my husband and I actually, when we were looking for my niece, um, law enforcement didn't, because she was 13 when she first started this journey, and they were like, she's just a runaway, or she's just making bad decisions, or she's just a prostitute, right? And so, which is heartbreaking to even say that out loud, right? My Bible tells me leave the 91 and go to the one. And
Yeah.
so it it matters. And I think law enforcement is now kind of shifting into understanding exploitation and trafficking much more than they did 15, 20 years ago. But in our case, because we recovered her 5 years in, so we recovered her twice, 5 years in, and my husband and I we were foster parents. So I'm like, oh, I have foster care training. Like, I've been prepared for a time such as this. And so when I went and got her and I moved her into our home, I thought I could handle the dynamic. But
Why was it twice? How could
because
that have happened twice?
because this is actually very, very common. And when, just like with domestic violence, oftentimes it takes 7 times to leave your abuser. And with trafficking, a lot of times it's the self-exploitation. It turns into a lifestyle. You're convinced that's the only way to make money. She, at that time, only had 3 children under the age of 4, all while she was being trafficked. And so we moved them into our home and we put in house rules, just like we would for our foster kids. And what's so hard is I didn't understand. And so there's a unique type of trauma that happens under when it's sex trafficking. And she couldn't navigate those house rules. And she ended up leaving, which was heartbreaking for us. And then she was gone for another 10 years.
What were
And
those house rules? What did you set? Like a time?
like
Like what?
Like you cannot bring anybody into the house we don't know. You can't go meet people that we don't know. We need to meet the people that you're hanging out with. We had her go to Celebrate Recovery to start working through her addictions. And you can't stay afterwards. Like we would go drop her off and pick her up because she didn't have the ability to make good life decisions. And one of them, and she didn't have to pay for anything. We took care of everything. We just wanted her safe. And there was one evening where she was taking her kids out, all 3 of her kids under the age of 4. It was 10 o'clock at night to go meet somebody. And I'm like, oh no, we're not doing that. We're
Oh
not,
my
we're
gosh.
not, no. And
How old
so,
was she when the house rules were being applied?
so she was, so the first time so she's 32 now. And so this
Okay.
was 12 years ago. So she was 20. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this. You're not taking these 3 babies out. Because when I had recovered her the first time, I had to fly down and go into a not very safe situation and pack her and her children up and extract her. So we knew that her life decisions, she was having an issue, some problems making good quality life decisions. So she leaves and then she kind of goes missing for another 10 years. 2022, I walked away from my legislative consulting firm. The Lord had me lay it down and I went to look for her full time. And my husband and I ended up getting our PI license because their law enforcement's like, she's an adult. They're not going to look for her. And so we had to do all the things. We had to figure out how to get on the dark web. And to do that legally, you needed to have your PI license. We needed to do image lookup. We needed to start figuring out how to geofence her phone and how to find her to narrow it down where she was. And so we did. And June 2 years ago, we got sign of life. We got proof of life
Oh,
and
thank God.
located her. And the other thing that's interesting that I think it's really important for us to talk about is the victims rarely self-identify. So when we finally found her, to explain to her that we needed to get her into a safe home so she could get the proper care, she couldn't wrap her head around that she was trafficked. Like for months, 3 months, to explain to her that my husband has never once sold me for cocaine. Never once. I never had to do a trick to pay for something. She couldn't because she'd been doing that for so long. It became normal. And so the deprogramming that has to happen is profound. We recovered her, we brought her up to Texas. We finding a safe house was that was traumatic in and of itself because safe houses are very particular of who they take, what drugs they can and cannot be on, what medications they cannot be on, if they're navigated to cartel or not, pimps or family members. So we finally found one, and she was in care for a year and a half. By this time, she'd had six children that we're aware of while she was being trafficked. And unfortunately, November, we found out that she had left the safe house before her program finished. So we are back looking for
Oh my gosh, she's missing right now
her.
for the third time. Okay.
And all of this could have been prevented. So, so here's where we're at in our country. There's awareness that happens, and we've got all kinds of resources out there for awareness, and that's so important. But it is time for prevention. We have to prevent this crime from even happening because this is a lifetime of trauma. The real work begins when you recover them. As hard as it was to not know where she was, once she was recovered, we need to partner with her all the days of her life to get her recovered, to get her job training, to get her kids back to her, to get some of the legal issues taken off of her record. Any crime that she may have committed while she was being trafficked should be expunged. Full stop. Full stop. And that's what I look at from a policy perspective is how do we come in and protect our kids from being exploited and trafficked in the first place? And we have to do that by flipping the narrative, creating this around personal safety, healthy relationships, healthy dialogue, so that now we are fortifying our kids and they would have the wherewithal to say, oh no, this is not right. They would have the wherewithal to tell a trusted adult. And one of the greatest gifts that we could give our kids is if we start having an exit strategy now. And what I mean by that is have these conversations. Have you ever shared a picture? Let's just start there, right? A digital picture of, inappropriate.
But that's so awkward. Don't you think that they're going to lie? I would
Well,
lie if I was 15 answering that question.
here's the thing.
Embarrassing.
It's okay. It doesn't matter what they say
Okay.
because, and let's say they say, of course not. I what? Right? Like what you and I may or may not have done, right?
Yes.
Said to our parents. But I'm just saying. But then here's what's most important is to say, well, if that ever does happen, if by any chance that ever happens, or if you know anybody that has done that, let's talk about what we would do if that happened. Because no longer are the days of if you take a picture, it's going to be on the internet and that your whole life could be ruined, right? No, 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 no. We now have a way to get that picture taken down from the internet thanks to the Take It Down Act. So you can actually take that image, put it into the NCMEC Take It Down Act. They have an online portal and they can help you take it down. Scrub the internet to find it and take it down. So now we have an exit strategy. So if you have these conversations in advance and say in our household, like my husband's kind of like the nice, fun guy, and I'm kind of like the Old Testament mom, right? So in our household, you identify who would you tell? And they're like, oh no, I would never tell you. That's fair,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But they would tell Daniel, or they would tell a trusted adult and have an exit strategy. So if it does happen and they can come to us and we create a safe space, we now have a remedy for it. Because what's happening with our young boys right now is they are being sextorted, sextortion, which is like it's like texting, right? Where you've got these groups out and overseas that are randomly texting people. I'm sure you get them. They're like,
Oh,
"Hi, how are you?" And
yeah, yeah.
they start sending them money, and then they get a picture of them, and then it goes from 0 to 60 so quickly because a boys, their cerebral cortex isn't as large as ours, and it takes a while for it to develop. So what's happening is that young men are going from being sextorted to suicide in a very short window. Like we talked about that most predators take about 9 months. Well, what's happening with these young men is these predators are saying, I'm going to tell your mom, your dad's a pastor. I'm going to ruin his life. Your dad's a cop. I'm going to ruin his career. So they start extorting them. And then these boys are sending them money. And then if it gets to the point where they don't think there's an out, they're committing suicide.
Oh my gosh. So they threaten our boys and they groom the girls.
That's exactly what's happening. And so we need to have these conversations about, okay, have you ever gotten a weird text and they're like, hey, I need to meet your phone, start having these what I call exit strategy conversations. And so then I would come home and tell my dad, hey, I got this weird text today. So you start building trust with your parents or a trusted adult. And then you can have these conversations along the way where it's not where it gets so crazy, like in my niece's situation. She got pregnant really, really early. I think she started trying to get pregnant like at 14. I think she ended up being pregnant at 16 because she wanted to be on that 16 and pregnant. You know that
Oh, the
show?
show. Yeah, yeah, the
And I'm
show.
like, this is not a good plan. Um, so she had a child really early, and then so she ended up being with an older man, and then he brought his brother in, and then they started doing partying and doing things they shouldn't be doing, watching a lot of porn, and where you start doing porn things, and then that's gradualism at its finest. So this is absolutely grooming. And girls are thinking they were just at a party and they made a bad decision, and then they carry the shame and the guilt. Well, then they're easier to be exploited. And then that's how it happens. So it's gradualism.
My I'm just in shock in everything that you're telling me. It's really interesting that you mentioned of having these conversations early on because it kind of sounds like it's like those hypotheticals. But you don't want to have those crazy hypotheticals in extremism, but rather having them kind of sound like real cases and then telling them if this happens, we have A, B, and C as a solution. And if this happens, then we have C, D, and D as a solution. That's the recommendation for both boys and girls.
Yes.
I
And to
love
talk about it. And even, we're working on discussion cards where if like Cards for Humanity. You ever played that
yeah.
game? Okay.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So conceptually, we have these conversation cards. We're rebranding them now, but we're to start having those kind of life games and it doesn't have to be serious. Like, how can we start having these conversations and normalizing it and to where you're sitting around with a group of friends and a girl starts talking about this weirdo guy, that creepy guy that texts her, and then her girlfriends can immediately say, oh, girl, that's not okay. Do you know what I mean? Where you can have these you you can have these conversations that are normalizing it, and you can even make a game out of it and have these conversation cards, and you have your girls over and you start talking about it, or youth group or soccer club, or really start embedding it into our culture and start having a culture of safety and what
Yeah, because
healthy relationships look like because we have been so bedazzled by social media that we have forgotten.
I remember growing up and just thinking the older the guy, the better. And it
Yep.
was like, if you're in seventh grade, if you're in eighth grade, that's where it all starts, by the way, going out with like a sophomore, a junior, a senior, that was like it. And so that was normalized back
I
in that
know.
time.
Well, I dated I I dated a guy 7 years older. I had just turned 14. In what world? And I brought him home and introduced him to my parents. And my dad's a cop. And in what world was that okay? They didn't say a word. Nobody said, hey, she's 14. You're out of high school. Like nobody even introduced that to the conversation.
And it's really interesting because my parents were very vocal about whatever. I guess it takes the comfort. Because here's the thing, though, I was always told what to do and what not to do, and to never make a mistake. And that mistake was don't get pregnant. However, I never got to talk. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I never got to talk of this is how the birds and the bees work and stuff like that. So it was a very confusing time overall. So I guess, how would you get parents to be more comfortable with having that conversation? Because some people are open, like regular normal people like you and me. And then there's like the weird parents that are like, oh my gosh, tell me about your sex life with your boyfriend. And then there's the other extreme end of my parents that were like, we're never talking about this. And if we never talk about this, then it's never going to happen.
That's right. That's right. I remember asking my dad, like, when could I date? And my dad was a big guy. We're from Alaska. He's like the 6 foot some guy, just big hands, big dude. And he looked at me and he goes, well, I suppose when anybody asks you to. And I'm like, okay, so as a child, I'm thinking, rock on. So I was making all kinds of inappropriate decisions way too early because nobody said, yeah, that's not a good idea. So to your point, we have what's called, if you go to our website, untrafficked.org, you're going to see, we call it a guardian training. And guardians are how our parents, our community members that we train to look for the red flags. We train how to have those conversations. We go into churches, casinos have reached out to us, schools. One of our biggest wins that we have, besides the fact that, of course, we're rescuing children from being trafficked and we're working with family members, is that we have a contract with DISD, with the Dallas Independent School District. We work with mentors that are going into the DISD, and we've trained them, and they go in each week and work with the most vulnerable population, which are there's about 4,000 kids that are coded homeless. And so we know that that's a top vulnerable population that we want to train them. We work with the Garland Independent School District has a group called Culture Makers, and they work with students and we train them. So we will train anybody to look for the signs, to know how to have these conversations, and as well, how to be a good witness. Because I'm sure you have been out there and you've seen something that wasn't right, but you're like, I'm not going to call the police because you don't want to be that lady, right? Well, I challenge every one of your listeners. I challenge everybody that I can possibly challenge. Be that crazy lady. Be that crazy lady because you know what? My niece could have used that one crazy lady to call in, and that could have saved her from a lifetime of pain. So we train you how to be a good witness. So there's a way where if you see something and somebody's life is in danger, call 911. Of course. If their life is not in danger and you feel like there's just something odd, go to untrafficked.org, put in a tip. My analysts will look at that tip, do all the things that they need to do to determine that that is a real threat. And then you can just hand it off to our analysts. And then we will decide, and then we'll either turn it over to law enforcement or we'll reach back out to the person who gave the tip and to do some more investigation. And then third, if it's obviously a human trafficking situation, HSI, the Homeland Security trafficking report line is the number one line. Many people say the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I'm not trying to throw shade on any organization because we need all of us. Alls I know is that we had a huge issue. About 80% of those calls for the National Human Trafficking Hotline were not picked up. And if we are so they're working on that. The organization that used to do that no longer has that contract, and so they've moved that to a different organization. They're working through it. So our battle cry is number one, if the life is in danger, 911. Number two, if you think there's something odd, but you can't quite put your finger on it, learn to be a great witness. Give us all the information and let us do the investigation. Of course, keep yourself safe. Thirdly, if it's like you seeing somebody that you believe is being either labor trafficked or sex trafficked, then HSI has a great hotline. We are partnered with them on the way we report. We are partnered with HSI on our training material, on our collateral material, so that we have their exact same standards, which is, of course, it's the gold standard in human trafficking. And then finally, We also have programs where we have stickers and put them in like the ladies' bathroom. If you are unsafe, if you do think that you are being exploited or trafficked, there is an organization that we have partnered with called Rescue America, and you can call that phone number and they will work with you to get out of that unsafe situation. And I don't care if that unsafe situation is your boyfriend is taking your phone or he is controlling you with money and it hasn't led up to exploitation or trafficking, but you just are unsafe and you can't get out. Because again, we want to prevent it from even happening. Rescue America has over 600 safe homes where they will have their exit strategists work with the victims, help them get out safely, and give them all the resources they need to rebuild their life. It's an incredible organization.
I guess my next question would have to be your organization, untrafficked.org. What what would make you stand out in the sense that, well, your niece, she was just kind of considered like a runaway case. Do you all uh, present it in a much better way and then hand it to the police, or you don't even involve the police? Or I'm sorry, I just
That is such a
what?
great question. No, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful question. So we do three main things. Number one, we protect the innocent through our education programs in the schools, right? And all of the education that we do. Number two, we hunt the hidden, which is you give us a tip and we're going to go look for that individual or we're going to go look for that predator. And we do a lot of the preliminary work in order to package it in the right languaging so that we can then hand off to proper law enforcement officers. Because an average tip takes us about 15 hours of research. And where we go online, we look at their socials, we look at their possible known acquaintances, we look at other things that most three-letter agencies would do. Um, and so we can package it and then hand it off to law enforcement. So we had a situation where there was a young boy, he came from Florida. His mom had moved him in multiple states because every time he got to a state, the same group were sending him those gifts, the talkies and the monsters to his house. Then it turned into more expensive gifts. Then it turned into girls, adult women showing up to have sex with him. He was 15. And mom kept, she would just kept leaving. She would try to find a new apartment. She sold her car so they could move somewhere else. And then he started making really bad decisions with cutting himself, harming himself. And there is a group called the 764s, which they're targeting young men, and it's a grooming of young men. And so often our victims become the perpetrator. And so they're grooming them to do that. So she kept moving and she reached out to us and we did our initial work. And our local law enforcement, because the case initiated in Florida, it's like we reached out to our local law enforcement. They're like, well, no, it's a Florida issue. And because there's jurisdictional issues and it's complicated, then it feels like no one's listening. Families get frustrated. They stop going to law enforcement because, like our family, nobody would help us. They're like, so, so what we do then is do more investigation because, of course, our law enforcement are completely tapped out. We'll do more investigation, build the case, create the evidence packet, hand it off. And then HSI or the FBI or whatever agency needs it, it's in the language that alerts them. It's kind of like building a rapport with them and then handing it off. And then they take the case and like realized, oh, this isn't just a one-off case. This case could technically be an entire ring. And so as as terrible as it sounds, so oftentimes our law enforcement officers, because of their lack of resources, they do like those bigger cases, right? And there's organizations out there like Skull Games and other incredible 501(c)(3)s that do a lot of this analyst work for big cartel cases, big trafficking cases. But my heart is for the one, is for that one child that's gone missing, that family doesn't have any resources. They don't know what to do. And we want to partner with the family to give them guidance and counsel and encouragement from a lived experience of I know what it's like to be on that other end. I know how frustrating and how scary and how hard it can be when you don't know if your loved one is even alive. So that's the hunt the hidden. And then finally, we help heal the broken, where we refer them out for services and provide services. So, really, what makes us unique and different is that not only are we educating, but we actually have a tip line. Very few organizations have a tip line. And every time I go speak, I have somebody come up to me and go, I saw something the other day, or my neighbor's kid, or there's always 2 to 3 people in the room. And I'm like, just go to our tip line. We will not, and even if it's domestic violence, even if it's a sexual assault, go to our tip line because oftentimes that sexual assault is tied into other things.
Do you think sex trafficking discriminates or does it care about your socioeconomic position or is it for all?
That is a fantastic question. And the answer depends on who you ask. So, So statistically, like if you go to, I was at the Texas Attorney General's roundtable on human trafficking, and they said like the number one um, demographic is if the socioeconomics, right? So if they're in poverty, they're much higher risk. And the single parent household is a much higher risk. Foster kids, right? We're foster parents. Foster kids, much, much higher risk group. And unfortunately, what we see on the ground is that it is no respecter of persons. This is across the entire threshold. Because remember, only 1% of victims um, outcry. So 99% of our victims aren't outcrying. 99%. So you've got the girls in Highland Park, you've got the girls in Garland, you've got the girls in LA, you've got that whole that fraud component of people thinking they're going to be models, like the Epstein situation, that they're going to be models. You have situations where you've got we work with the immigrant community as well because they come into a new country. We want to let them understand and educate them on what to look out for because the way that they can get sucked in is going to look a little different. It could be somebody's controlling your ID. It could be girls at school. We had a case where it was a football player and it was either East or West Texas, so I don't want to misspeak, who was running like 13 girls, was exploiting 13 girls in high school.
A football player?
Yeah,
A teenager.
yeah.
What's
And that's
trafficking?
happening. Yes, yes. So it's peer on peer because what's going on, all right, pornography is a whole other topic, which we'll have to get back together and chit chat about. But we're seeing where boys are accessing porn at the age of 8.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, that is
So
true.
then these precious boys are seeing porn and then they go do porn things to one another. And so we're seeing a huge uptick in rape, child on child rape, because they're getting access to it online. And then they think there's something wrong with them. Then they've been desensitized. The chemicals in the brains have changed. They're now addicted to porn. And the porn addicted brain, if you scan it, looks exactly like a heroin addicted brain. And so now you've got neurotransmitters that aren't firing. You've got a cerebral cortex that's not developed. And so they think this is normal. And then they enroll or groom either young girls or young boys to be doing these types of things. And it's now an epidemic across this country. The hypersexualization of children. And that's why I fought so hard to get the bad books out of school because my 12-year-old foster son came home with a genderqueer book from his elementary school and it showed a graphic novel of oral sex. And I'm like, you're
That
12.
hasn't been banned? That hasn't been banned
So,
in the state of Texas?
well, that we passed HB 900. However, what ends up happening is that they pull the books out of schools and then they get them put back in. So it's a game of whack-a-mole. So you've got all these books in schools, and then which kids think is normal. And then you've got, if they're online at school, the online resources are just as bad. They all these Chromebooks and they type in boob on their online resource, and all of a sudden it goes to a sex shop because it's an aggregator. And so they're seeing all these images. It's on their phones, it's in cartoons, it's on TV, it's in the music. So they're inundated and it desensitizes them. And so we have got to reclaim our culture, stop the hypersexualization of our children so that when these things occur, and they will, they have the resources to navigate it and not get sucked into it.
It's everywhere. You're right. It's on clothes as well because my friends, they are now with child, like they're pregnant and yay, they're going to start a family and stuff. And we were shopping for baby clothes and, they live in Florida and, the little bathing suits. For the boys, it's like just a basic, short situation and a t-shirt and it matches with a little shark and it's all blue. Okay, great. But for the girls, they have a little bikini and a little skirt and a little thingy, taka, taka, ta. They're two. It's two teens, two toddlers, and
Yes,
they're dressed like that.
yes. We were in Hawaii, my
Yeah.
sweet husband, we were in Hawaii, and he's sitting at the beach and he's like, honey, I can't look anywhere. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't know where to look. And I'm like, what do you mean
Yeah.
you don't look? And he's like, because they all have thongs, all have thong bikinis. I mean, we're talking 7, 8-year-old girls have it. Mm-mm. And he's like, this is just wrong on every level. Because once you start seeing it, then you can't unsee it. And so how do we reclaim our culture? How do we reclaim our children's youth and their innocence? And we have to do this. That's why I'm so involved in policy, because if we can fortify and prevent it from even happening. So we're in the prevention stage. It's awareness has come and gone, prevention, and how can we fortify and fill these gaps where it's over the last 25 years, we've just lost our way. Everything has been bastardized, and we've got to reclaim it one step at a time. And together, culturally, if we become the guardian of our home, we need to untraffic our own home. If everybody took a look at what am I watching? What am I listening to? How am I spending my time on my device? How is my device stealing time from my children? How can I be present and engaged? That is what's going to change our country. And that is really what us at Untrafficked are focused on doing is you got to untraffic your home, untraffic your community, and we can do that through we've got Zoom trainings, you can request a training. We've got in-person trainings that we do. We'll go talk to anybody. We'll get 5 of your friends together, we'll do a training. We've got to create this guardian of our own community, and that's the way that we'll get back on track.
Yeah, it's I remember growing up and my mom, she would say, en esta casa se alaba el Señor. Like in this household, we will worship the Lord. And it wasn't like severe extreme monetization, but like definitely being careful in the cartoons, in the shows that we were watching. I mean, even That's So Raven, you know what I mean? Like so innocent in the sense that like, oh, she has visions. Well, it ties back to uh,
Well, who is giving her those visions? Yes. Yeah.
exactly. Well, I mean, Disney itself is a whole
Yeah.
uh, monster of its own. I don't really like what is happening now. It's horrible. But not the point. The point is that yes, de-trafficking your home really does start with the values that you have as a Christian household. What music are you allowing them? Filtering your eyes, filtering your ears, filtering your mouth, and the way that you're cussing and the way that you're speaking. Are you speaking life? Are you speaking death? And most importantly, showing value. I think a lot of um, problems that I remember seeing growing up was the fact that girls weren't getting the attention of their dads.
Yeah.
The dad's always working, and it's just like, and it's seeking that boyfriend slash daddy thing,
Yeah.
hence enter the groomer situation.
That's right. That's right. And I also think it's important to mention where a lot of people, when I share my niece's story, are like, well, why didn't she just leave? Like, what do you mean? Like, was she chained to the radiator? Like, why didn't she just leave? And I think it's really, really important for us to understand. the brain, the trauma that happens in the brain, and the reason why not only 1% report, very few cases get prosecuted, and we need to change that in this country. The P. Diddy case is a perfect example. The reason that he wasn't charged with human trafficking is because his girlfriend, initially, it was consensual. Because it's consensual until it's not. So she went to the parties. She did the things, right? And then when she decided, okay, I want out, she couldn't get out. But because there was proof of a consent, that's why they couldn't prosecute. So
Part of that,
women,
aside from Diddy though, like wouldn't it also be like a organized crime? I'm seeing a lot of that in the Miami cases too when it comes to human trafficking. Now they're calling it organized crime.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
I mean, so for him, it would have been organized crime. But again, it goes back to the fact that she was consenting to it. So they couldn't, that's why they had to find the Mann Act of like transferring people across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. That's different and holds a different penalty than human trafficking or sex trafficking. And because she was consenting, and then when she wasn't consenting anymore, that's the part that we need to understand: force, fraud, and coercion. And so she was forced into it. But prosecutors need to understand this crime differently. Police need to understand this crime differently because we have to start looking at it as far as I'm concerned, all sex trafficking is against their will. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be a prostitute today. Nobody does that. Now, we have groomed them into believing that having sex with men for money is an appropriate or is a viable source of income. We have those, I'm sure you've seen the Sugar Baby University. Sugar
um,
Baby University is a program that is on colleges across this nation where adult women, they teach them to have sex with men and their school can be paid for to become a sugar baby. And
no.
like Google it. It's like sugar baby you. And so it's like these girls thinking they're being it's some kind of like vindication and well, I have sex with men for nothing and I might as well get paid for it. And it's sweeping across this nation. And so young girls going to college, right? 17, 18, 19. Well, they're adult by 18. And so we've got to fortify and protect them to where if they see that table set up on orientation day at college, they're like, absolutely not. In fact, no college should host that. That's 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 reprehensible. Yes, it's reprehensible. And so we've got to shift that narrative. And so women don't just wake up and want to have sex for money. It's a grooming, whether there was some trauma in their childhood, there was abuse, there was neglect, there's something definitely missing. We have this whole movement right now to decriminalize prostitution. Like I cannot tell you how many states I've gone in and I've fought that and I've testified against it because we know when you do that, the instances of child sex trafficking is dramatically increased. Like we've got so many different ways that we need to protect our community and protect our women and our children. And so to do that, it's going to take all of us together. And that's why building coalitions, I work with a lot of nonprofits, and get really good at what we do, right? Like we just should stop duplicating efforts and start working collectively and cooperatively so that we can make a bigger impact.
I also wanted to mention this recent case that has been going viral, and it's the most atrocious thing I've ever heard, read, seen in my entire life. I'm sure you've heard it by now. It's called the House of Horrors, where 16 children were rescued in Ohio. They were ranging from the ages of 1.5 to 18 years old from a single filthy 12 by 12 foot room where they had been locked up for the past 4 years. The home was filled with human waste, feces, garbage. The conditions were deplorable to the point where officials literally described it as pure evil. And authorities, they even said that their livestock was kept in much better conditions than these innocent children. Some of them couldn't speak. One of the 18-year-olds, she was unable to write her name. Seven of them were hospitalized. Two of them were flown into trauma centers. Authorities, they warned that, one more day in this environment, it could have resulted in many deaths. The parents and the grandparents of four adults with fully developed coconut heads up here, were charged with 16 counts of second degree felony child endangerment. I feel like it should have been like I don't even know, just something else, maybe stronger. All four pleaded not guilty, the nerve, if not the audacity, and they're being held on bond, $300,000 on bond. The children are now safe in state custody, which is a concern also, because the state doesn't really do a good job about taking care of the children clearly. Prosecutors say that this is not a human trafficking case. Tammy, this case was hidden in plain sight. This wasn't a border issue because they're American and it's happening in our communities, like you said, your thoughts.
You know, I- to your point, I have no words. Like, I cannot even imagine 16 children in one room. I cannot imagine that poor woman who was given birth. I did read that she may have had 20 pregnancies. Those were 16 of the live pregnancies. At least that was what I read. Again, I don't have any proof that that's accurate or not. So obviously, when she got married at 15, right? So she was married and she was already pregnant at 15. So you've got something going on there, right? Normal 15-year-olds aren't getting pregnant. So there's something going on there. So I would say this is generational abuse. I would say that obviously there was something going on with her and the boy that she married. But more importantly, what we know to be true, and I think I mentioned it early on, is that if there is sexual abuse or abuse at all in the home, you are up to 87% more likely to be exploited and trafficked in the future. So we have to understand that these traumas that these kids are going through, if they don't get trauma therapy, if they don't get care, the proper care, this could damage them all the days of their life. Children are resilient. Obviously, we all have our stories. But I am telling you, the hidden cost of brain trauma for children that have gone through abuse, and specifically this horrific of abuse, this will be a whole lifetime of care that they're going to need. But what's astounding is it happened in plain sight, just like my niece was trafficked in plain sight, just like it's happening right now. And we have an epidemic in this country. The United States is the number one purchaser of sex. We're the number one creator of porn. You've got Texas and California vying for the top positions of purchasing sex in the world. In the world. It's not just in the United States, it's in the world. Because most people think these tragedies happen over there, that it's an over there problem. I'm here to tell you it is a here problem. It is American born children right now is the number one demographic being trafficked, and it's up to 47% of the trafficking is happening by family members or a trusted adult. That's called familial trafficking, up to 47%. So we're doing this to our own children in plain sight. And as I stated earlier, only about 1.5% are actually kidnapped. So 98.9 whatever percent is happening where these kids are living at home or they're living with a family member and they go to school or they're going out at night and they're being trafficked and they come home because this crime is mutating faster than law enforcement can keep up because of, unfortunately, our devices, because of the online element.
One of Something very interesting in this statement would be that the state has custody of these children. How safe are these kids under state custody?
Oh, so I mean, I can say this because I was in the system. I mean, not in the system, but we were foster parents. And so we tried for years to reform the foster care program. We know statistically, it's like 98% of kids that are in the foster care system have been either sexually abused or have been exploited. So, I- so there's that problem, right? They're already at high risk. They're already in the system, and the system is absolutely overcrowded. We have a problem with the way foster care works, the way the state tracks them. Um, it is not safe. It is not good. It's not right. It's not just. I I call on the churches. In Texas last session, we filed a bill that would help churches to become foster agencies and lower the bar so that more churches could rise up and do what I believe God is calling us to do. We are mandated as Christians to take care of the orphans and the widows. If every church would rise up and actually open their doors and care for the orphans and the widows, we would not have a foster care program. The church would be fostering these children as we're called to do. And so I challenge, how many churches do we have in Texas? It's like, I don't know, like 500,000 or something, right? And how many kids do we have in care? I think it's about the same in number, about half a million kids are in foster care in Texas. So if every church would just take one kid, we've solved the problem. We've solved it. But most people, when Daniel and I had said that we want to be foster parents, most people are like, oh, you don't know what you're doing. It's going to be so hard. How about this? We were never promised ease and effort. We were never promised a soft life as Christians. So I'm going to rise up. I'm going to do the hard things. I'm going to take these children, love on them, and care for them and see the absolute beauty. With our kids, we wanted the experience of our kids to be the most incredible experience of their life. Instead of hardwiring them as foster care was horrible, I want them to walk out going, that year we spent with Tami and Daniel was the most amazing year we've ever had. We saw what healthy relationship looks like. We got to go to church weekly. We got to travel. We got to understand what life could be. And so that's my call to the church because the foster care system is absolutely tragically broken. I know that there are good people in the system, but the system itself is broken.
And once again, relying on government in that sense is not foster care is government, right? It is. Yeah. Mike,
Yeah,
anywhere
so the
from the
foster care
previous
system,
episode.
yeah, like CPS, and they did a foster care transformation in Texas where they kind of privatized it. So now it's like they have regions and they have these regional centers that if you get a child brought into the CPS in that region, they try to keep the child in that particular region. Um, and we had a really complicated, we had siblings and it was very complicated because the state couldn't figure out what was in the best interest of the kid. One child wanted to be adopted, one did not want to be adopted. They were teenagers. Um, we didn't feel that we should force them to be adopted, so we wanted them to be able to age out in our care where we will take care of them. You know what? Like when they're 18, 19, 20, they could live with us for as long as they wanted to. We didn't have to adopt them, but the state wouldn't allow that. They removed the kids from us because they were like, well, there's no guarantee that you'll keep allowing them in your home. So, and I'm like, what? Like, we don't need the $20 a day. Like it was literally $20 a day per kid. So we get $40 a day for two kids. What are you going to do with that? Like it wasn't about the money. It was about caring and loving for these kiddos. Um, and so for the state, they get bonuses or benefits. The way that they track their success is permanent placement. And so they wanted these kids to get adopted for permanent placement. But the kids would just act out anytime people talked about adoption. So they would blow up they would blow up the opportunity. So that's a whole other conversation that we can share. But yeah, foster kids are at risk 100%.
Why would they not want to? Why one of them not want to?
Well, because they love one, we had a boy and a girl, and the girl wanted to be adopted. She was the older one, but the young boy, he didn't want to be adopted because didn't want to, lose his last name. His parents, his dad was in jail. His mom signed off on the parental rights, and he was holding on to hope that he could go live with his brother who was in the Navy. So he pushed back, and then the state did they evaluated them, and they had two psychiatrists evaluate the kids and try to figure out what was in the kid's best interest. And we're like, we're in their best interest and they can just live here just like our own kids, where they could come and go. They can go to college, they can come back and live here, and the state wouldn't allow it. And that broke our hearts. That was hard. It wasn't hard that to do the work of the being a foster care parent. What was hard was seeing the state fail those kids. That was
It comes
hard.
back to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and I was going to church, early out in church, and there was this one lady who had one son. She was only able to have one son and she adopted four. And the compensation for that financially, she definitely got this like hefty check monthly. You're correct on that. And the beautiful thing is that this check provided exactly what was needed for these children to do great in school. They were wonderful kids, mind you, because I was a teacher. I was a Sunday school teacher for them. They all just happened to be on the same. They were twins. One of them was a pair of twins, and the other one was just like a year or 2 years off. The mom made sure, the family made sure to keep the brothers and sisters together.
Yes.
I will always remember them in my heart because they were such great kids. And she provided the life that was required for them. She got them vacations and the nice. They were always so clean, always so presentable, so wonderful. And I just wonder your idea. If we really expand on your theory, right, of allowing the church to adopt at least one kid, if the government is required to give the church that subsidy, then how much more amazing would the investment be? Because the church knows how to invest in it.
Right.
So like it would be like I'm not saying like private school, like I'm not saying like the luxurious, but like imagine like the transformation of a mission trip that this child would be able to go to and just like experiencing that like evangelism lifestyle maybe. I like that's just like what I'm brainstorming. Like what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it really is an opportunity for, because if the kids are in, at least in Texas, and every state's policy is different, but in Texas, if they're in the foster care system, they can go to a state college for free. And so, and very few kids actually take advantage of that. But if one family would say yes, right? And they would have support from their community members, they would have, to your point, they would have the medical paid for. They would have their college paid for. These kids would have an opportunity to watch and grow and thrive inside of these, biblical based churches. Uh, it it would just be amazing. And the other thing is that why wouldn't we make the barrier to entry lower? And what I mean by that, like the state of Texas, to become a child placement agency, it's like a 2,500 page document of the basic standards, Texas minimum standards. And it's very complex, it's very difficult. You have to build the building, put everything in place, and then apply for a license to be a child placement agency. And so what we're saying is that's like a 2, 3, 4 million dollar venture before you even know if you can be a child placement agency. Why wouldn't we give the church, still have requirements, of course, still have safety requirements, background checks, all the things, but lower the barrier so that the church, if somebody brings in a child, like baby Moses, the Moses boxes here that we have in Texas, where you can, if a mom, instead of dumping a kid in a trash can or in a dumpster somewhere, they can bring the baby into these boxes, and then they've got people who can pick up the child and care for the child. So that there's ways that we can do this that can really restore community and safety and be effective, um, and reallocate funds appropriately. So it just makes sense. The bill didn't get, it was the Sound of Hope Act is the bill that we filed. It didn't get as much traction as we wanted it to. So hopefully this next session we'll be able to do it. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree. How could it not? Again, why is politics even a thing when it comes to the safety of a child? It just baffles me. And well, speaking of children that are being, uh, it's just so sad to think of when they're being placed in trash cans and they're still
I
alive,
mean, I know,
not
right?
alive. It's horrific. Reports show that 450,000 children were lost during the Biden administration, as you know. This led to a congressional hearing that happened last week, and it was disturbing evidence where the children they ended up in exploitation, and this includes trafficking as well. And so, shocking, not a single Democrat showed up to that hearing, not one, not two, zero. And in my humble opinion, like I mentioned to you earlier, politics should not be involved when it comes to having the safety of a child, especially when it comes to human trafficking. Your thoughts?
Well, it's here's what I wonder. I know that the number that they say is
Mhm.
450,000.
Registered
That mhm.
that part.
So I'm wondering, just out of curiosity, is
Mhm.
how many, what's the real number? Number one. Um, Number two, when this process was happening and that we were the kids were flooding and coming over, and they were just giving these kids to just anybody. Again, as a foster parent, we had to go through 40 hours of training. They went through every little bit of our life. They went through every bit of our marriage. I mean, it was such an invasive process to be approved by the state to make sure that we were not, that we were safe people. That when they brought these kids over, it was like kind of gave them to anybody. They may have been related, they may have not been related. They wouldn't even ask if this child was related to the adult that brought them over. And what we know in the human trafficking space is a lot of times they would use these children. They would come over with the kids, and then they would take the kids back over and come back over with them because that was a way that they could get into this country with no questions asked if you had a child with you. So they would recycle these same kids. Like we have no idea the real number. And the fact that we, A, know that this was how the cartel did it, um, it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful.
It is shameful. And I didn't
Uh,
know that the kids were being used.
we would recycle them and they would bring them back over and they would
Yeah,
bring them back over. And so at the end of the day, shame on our government. At the end of the day, this is clear proof that we cannot trust our government, that the people,
mhm.
only we consent to the governor, right? And so we've got to reclaim it back, reclaim our communities, be the guardians of our home and the guardians of our communities, because the government is not equipped. And it was never
Oh no,
designed
of
to
course
do
not.
that. Yeah.
And it's so ironic that when you want to do things right, when you want to do things the right way, legally, it's like they put every hurdle that you possibly can. But when you do things illegally, it's just like, oh, well, whatever works. This Speaking of the governors, I just can't get enough. It's back in 2005, 2006. I'm going to attempt to say this name of this horrible, most disgusting person ever. Uh, Tu Lu Vang or Vong. I think he's I don't even know, a foreigner. He pleaded guilty to first degree criminal sexual conduct for repeatedly and brutally sexually abusing a 10-year-old girl over a period of 5 years, from 10 to 15 years old. He confessed as a part of the plea deal, and he served no jail time, no prison time, and was happy, happy, go, go, released by the one and only Democratic governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. There's somewhat of a lack of urgency, I feel, with these Democratic governors. I don't even want to get started with Newsom, but we'll start with Tim Walz in this case. Uh, what do you think?
Well, I am a fan of Florida's new law where if you rape a child, it's the death penalty.
Mhm.
And I struggle with that because I'm pro-life. And so I feel like, well, I need to be pro-life from the womb to the grave, like from the womb until natural death. However, in this instance, you rape a child, that's it. Like there is at you have lost your opportunity to continue to be on this earth. Like I believe in Jesus as the Redeemer, of course, yes. Um, but that is shameful. And I cannot believe that people consistently do that. We see it all across this nation. We see it even in Republican-led states. This is not unusual. It is tragic and it is disgusting. And we need to make having sex with a child unthinkable. And to do that, that means you end your life. We have to increase these penalties And if they know that their life was at risk, I think it would be a game changer. Now, obviously, it's a matter of the heart. Obviously, people who abuse children or sexually abuse anybody, there's a lot of things going on here. Um, but when it comes to a child, I'm telling you, we did it in Florida, we did it in Ohio, I believe, also passed it, and we're filing in Texas.
Remember the repercussions. I read of several cases where it was chemical castration. And to your point, I don't think that's enough
Nope.
if
Because
you're a pedophile.
you can rape a child with other things. So that
Oh
is not
my
enough.
gosh. I didn't even think of that. That is,
That is not the problem, right? That is not that is absolutely in my perspective, it's an absolute joke. That is absolute nonsense. The chemical castration is nonsense.
why?
Because you
I
can,
mean, it
because,
is. I
yeah,
agree, but
it's
like you
nonsense
give a
because you
better,
can, yes, because you can rape people with things, right?
I mean,
Like
yes, true.
it's not just, it's not just that thing, it's other things. And so if you're going to abuse or hurt or harm a child in that kind of profound way, there needs to be absolute repercussion. And to the point of death, I think is a fair exchange.
Flat out demonic at that point. Like to physically want to cause harm on
Good.
purpose in that sense. If you can't do anything, okay, well, you're gonna use an item. That's just flat out like
And
Satan.
I don't know, and now I've not done like a deep dive in research. Like I'm not, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a, right. But just common sense tells me, yeah, if you're wired that way, it's not, a sex crime is rarely about the sex. It's rarely about the sex. So this
Yeah,
isn't
that's what you
like
mean.
they can't control themselves. Like it's rarely about the sex. It's about
Um,
domination, it's about control, it's about a lot of other things than sex. And so they've missed the mark on that. The causation is different. The root of the matter is different.
this is just like all hitting really well. It just hit different when you said that other things can be
Yes.
used. I just
I know.
that is sticking in my head. Like that is ridiculous to me. Um, just to oh, last thing. We mentioned the last time that you mentioned it earlier actually about how the US was the number one buyer in the world, and it was regarding for sex, like literally receiving it, wanting it. And Texas and Cali, top states of porn and trafficking. As of recently, the World Cup is happening, as you know. And the news industry now is just acting up and saying, "Oh, well, let's take precautions because so many people are coming in and they're just leaving, and it's the World Cup, it's the soccer, it's the World Cup, so tempting with the trafficking. Oh, you better be careful. You better be careful what's happening." Okay, what happens when the World Cup ends?
That's right. I mean, another like weird place for me to be in because as much as I want to celebrate that um, sex trafficking and buying sex is more in the atmosphere because of these big games that are coming on. I was at a roundtable conversation with a Texas senator, and they were talking about like the campaign, like what are we going to do to help defer, like how to avoid. And one of the things that they did is they put messaging in the men's restroom that buying sex was a crime. And I'm like, okay, so first of
That's
all,
interesting.
that's your
That's interesting.
deferment. Like they're saying, well, they don't know. Because in their minds, they were thinking of all the men coming in from different countries, that it's those men who didn't know that buying sex is a crime. And I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, like, guys, it's our men. Like, it's our men know. Like, it's not like, but they were so detached because they were just coming up with ideas. Like, we just need to tell men that it's a, I'm like, no. Uh, I mean, yes, of course we need to tell men that, right? However,
The fact that we have to tell them.
I mean, I know, right? I'm like, in what world? But more importantly, what they weren't having the conversation is when the World Cup leaves, the trafficking stays. So it's not like you've got pimps and these guys that are like traveling with these big sports events, right? They come in, they set up shop, they stay. And something that I did a couple of weeks ago when I was in Houston, um, I I worked with a group that was making outbound phone calls to the sex ads that are being advertised for um, the World Cup. And we were calling sex ads and we were getting to talk to the women. And we got to encourage them to that there's resources. That we said, we are with this group called Exit the Life, and that we provide resources for women who want to get out of the life. And can we pray for you? And all these resources are covered. We can help you exit safely. We can help your family members exit safely. We can get you into safety. Everything's paid for. And may we pray for you. And it was amazing. It was amazing that the women that picked up, a lot of them said, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. A lot of them had kids in the background. You could hear the kids crying. And it was such an honor to be able to pray with these women and to encourage these women and to give them hope. And then if they were ready to exit the life, then we could transfer them over to Rescue America. That humanized them. I think that's important for us to recognize is that we need to humanize these women. And when we can do that and hold them at their highest, and that these are daughters of the King of the Most High, these are his precious children, that Christ died on the cross for their sin just as much as my sin, now we can look at it differently. Like it's not just sex trafficking. This is somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's sister. This could have been my niece. I don't know. I don't know her full story when what she was up to. I think that's what we need to look at as humans and as precious daughters of the King of the Most High. What can we do? Who can we be in that time? And so for us here at Untrafficked, we encourage anybody who even sees a sex ad, please send it in to us on our tip line. Like we have a way that we can be reaching out to these precious, precious women who are lost and who need a chance to recover.
And you're so right. How many times have we been objectified? Just
Yep.
walking down the street, whistled, catcalled, honked at, yelled at, everything,
Yep.
all the
All of
things.
it.
Tammy, what's your website called? One more time.
It's untrafficked.org. Untrafficked.org. Yeah. Go to untrafficked.org, and we are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, um, on LinkedIn. Please find us if you have any questions, if you want training, if you have questions, if you think that you know somebody who is in a situation they can't get out of, please go to our tip line. If you're in a situation that you can't get out of, go to our tip line. If you are concerned about somebody at school or a friend or somebody at church, please go to our tip line. There's no such thing as a ridiculous tip. We want you to be that man or that woman that rises up and speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves. Because together we can untraffic America.
Be putting that phone number in a banner
Okay, great.
in case on the website as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Rodriguez, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it. And God bless you, and may he keep you, and may his face shine upon you, my dear. Thank you.